Welcome to Living Martial Arts with Master Ray Gale, aka the Dark Master. Living Martial Arts discusses and examines the everyday exercise, philosophy, and lifestyle of the martial arts enthusiast. The host talks about his own training, past and present, and he also interviews many martial artists to discover how they continue to live their own martial arts journey. Tune in for top tips on how to get the best out of your martial art. Or perhaps you're thinking of starting a martial art. This podcast offers you an easy way to dip your toe in. Sign up for the newsletter at livingmartialarts.com and get regular updates and training tips direct to your inbox. Follow the Dark Master on Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram at Living Martial Arts.
Hello and welcome to the Living Martial Arts podcast with me, once again, the Dark Master, back with another fantastic guest. We have a mutual friend, and actually I came by this particular guest by chance, but I just thought, wow, what a fantastic story that he has, in the way that he started his martial arts journey. So I've got Mr. Geoff Aldridge, and perhaps we can first of all say hello, Geoff. How are you?
Very good, thank you. Really nice to be here. It's absolute pleasure, honour to do this podcast with you. So looking forward to it.
Excellent, well done. Well, as I said, we've got a mutual acquaintance in Mr. Alfie Lewis, who knows probably more martial arts people than anyone else in the world.
Most definitely, yes.
And which is great, fantastic. And I was listening to you and him on Facebook. I thought, wow, I need to interview this guy. He's got a great story. So, I mean, without further ado, perhaps you could elaborate on some of that stuff that I heard. But perhaps you can tell us about a little bit about your martial arts journey, how it started, and how it's progressed. And I'll ask you some questions about it anyway. Go for it.
Okay. Yes. No worries. For those that sort of sat through the interview with Sensei Alfie a few days back, so I'd been up in Liverpool training with him. We'd had a lovely lunch, and then he just whipped out his phone and went, "Geoff, how did you get started in martial arts?" and recorded a bit of that. So I'll repeat some of that for those that don't know that story. So we're going back. Actually, before that story, because we were just nattering a little bit before the podcast started, I did start with judo when I was 6 years old, and did a few months of judo. I mainly remember sitting on the back of my father's moped, going back and forth to judo classes when I was 6. And I did enjoy it until I did first judo competition, and that put me off judo. So yeah, martial arts went back a little bit further, but then fast forward to when I was 12 years old, and a really good friend of mine from school, a lad called Robert, kept hassling me to come and join him in his karate class, and telling me how great it was, how much he enjoyed it, and how much he was getting out of it. And after weeks, probably months, eventually agreed that I would go and give it a try. It was a 10-15 minute walk to the local leisure centre, and I went to the reception, said, "Where's the karate class?" and she sent me down the stairs and round, and I remember we used to train in this archery hall, so it was good fun. So did first class, absolutely enjoyed it, really got a lot out of it, and thought, actually, this is something that I think I would quite like to do. Met back with Robert at school the next day, so that was a Sunday. Monday, he was like, "Where were you?" and I was like, "Well, where were you?" And in a brief conversation, we figured out that there was 2 karate clubs who trained in the same leisure centre, both on Sunday mornings, and I'd gone to one, whereas he was in the other. Obviously, he was like, "Oh, you need to come back next week and try my club." And I was like, "Actually, nah, I really enjoyed the club that I did, and I'm gonna sort of give that one a go." I am a persistent creature of habit. So once I've set my mind to something, generally I will stick that something out, other than the judo. But yeah, so that was a local club part of a national association called the English Contact Karate Association, headed up at the time jointly by Howard Brown and Sensei Dev Barrett, both absolute legends in British full contact karate and kickboxing. So I did a year or so at that club, progressed through a few of the grades, and then things did get a little bit strange. So first of all, we changed venue. So we moved from my local leisure centre to a Japanese school across. So this was in a place called Milton Keynes, which most people wouldn't have probably have heard of, but about halfway between London and Birmingham. So moved across Milton Keynes to this Japanese school, and then a couple of weeks later, the instructor was sort of like, "You need to buy new kit." So we had the traditional ECKA blue jacket, white trousers, unless you were an instructor at the time. And then suddenly it was all black kit, which obviously looked cool. Everyone was like, "Oh, it'd be cool to be a ninja." But, you know, sort of a little bit strange. And then I think week 3, Sensei Dev turned up with a couple of his higher grades and just sort of went, "Did you all know this instructor has left your association? You're not going to be insured as the same. You're not going to have the same sort of competition and everything else, facilities." And I sort of trundled back home, and my parents went, "You're going back to the leisure centre. You're training with that guy. You need to be doing, you know, what you liked, and everything, you know, proper and legitimate." Yeah. So from that point on, Sensei Dev took over that local Bletchley Club himself, rather than the other instructor. So he's based in Coventry, anybody who doesn't know. So he used to, on his Sunday mornings, drive from Coventry to Luton, probably about 75 miles, teach in Luton, and then drive about 20 miles or so from Luton to Bletchley, and then taught us, and then drove back to Coventry. So he did that for many years. Actually did that until 1999, when he then incredibly kindly handed the Bletchley Club over to me and went, "You teach this one now, Geoff." And yeah, I've been teaching the same Bletchley Club ever since. So yeah, my life changed that day. Whether I would have stuck it out, probably not. That club eventually folded, disappeared, as those folks sort of do. But ECKA and Sensei Dev still going super strong. So yeah, the fate or worlds aligning, however you want to describe that day, that decision absolutely changed my life, and had such a positive impact on me.
Wow. Well, it's a great story. I mean, there were a few things that you said there. The first one you mentioned, Howard Brown, and I remember seeing an article, you know, in the early days of magazines, and the people that I used to think, wow, you know, this guy. I remember reading an article about him, thinking, wow, I'd love to meet him. I never did actually, even in all my martial arts sort of career, and go to different tournaments around the country. Never actually met up with him, to be honest. It would have been nice to have talked about that, you know, because he was quite a legend. He was
absolute legend. And we were talking about, I'm also relatively little. I think if we ever meet, Ray, I might top you by about an inch or so, but not much. Definitely, I just look slightly bigger, one thing. But no, I remember we saw Howard fight for the world title once. And I went with my parents. I was still probably a teenager at that point. My dad's even shorter than me, probably shorter than you, Ray. And I remember him going, "Did he?" And of course, he was absolute tiny, you know, really light, really short, but ferocious, and that absolutely inspiring. Because of course, at school, generally, if you're the little kid, everyone sort of tries to pick on the little kid, and suddenly this little kid who'd grown up was just smashing all, you know. So yeah, really inspiring. Not just his ability, but his ability at that size to smash him a false perception that If you're little, you can't do these sort of things. Yeah. So yeah, I was truly honoured. My black belt grading with the ECKA was 1992, and that was Howard Brown and Sensei Dev Barrett. So they were my two grading examiners, and I travelled to Birmingham. I was still a child, so I was 17 then. Done 5 years of training. Got on the train. Got to Birmingham train station. Just it is different world. Just found the trains, the coach bus station at Birmingham. Asked every driver whether they went anywhere near this leisure centre, and then eventually someone was like, "Jump on here, lad, and I'll tell you when you need to get off." And then sort of trundled along, did my grading, and then sort of got back. And then years and years later, I remember Sensei Dev saying to me, I was shocked your parents let you do that trip. You know, that was a really dodgy bit of Birmingham, don't you? It's sort of like, no, we had no idea where I was going.
Well, I think I can top that. I'm just saying that because when I took my black belt, I had to go to Glasgow.
Wow.
from Bristol. And I remember saying to my parents, I said, "Oh, I'm gonna take my black belt," and they said, "All right, okay." Well, bearing in mind I was my lessons were like 10 minutes away, walk. They said, "Oh, great, where are you going?" I said, "Glasgow." It's Glasgow. I'll tell you what, I mean, it was this was 1981, and Glasgow was a very different place at that time. And I remember looking at the policemen thinking, "Wow, these guys are here," because they had to be. Minimum height in Glasgow was 5'10" for a policeman at that time. And, everyone was just sort of huge, and it was just like going to a different world. But I'll imagine it's very similar, But and again, some interesting things. I remember saying to someone recently about the Midlands that in the early days, I used to read these magazines, Fighters, Combat. And all these people seem to come from the Midlands.
Yeah.
There was such a huge amount of talent in the Midlands of people from all not just karate, but all different styles.
Yeah.
And in fact, Taekwondo, my style was very, very big in the Midlands as well. A lot of the senior grades at that time, the black belt instructors were in the Midlands. And they're just amazing, In fact, one of my colleagues now, because you mentioned about traveling, he lived in Coventry, still lives in Coventry, actually, a good friend of mine. And he started a school, believe it or not, in Brighton and the Isle of Wight.
Wow.
To travel weekly from Coventry to Brighton and the Isle of Wight, which was, absolute bonkers. Because at that time, I think, 83, I started my first school in Bath. I was living in Bristol, so it was like 12 miles, and everybody thought I was bonkers. so there we go. But I'd love at some point as well. I must try and get hold of Dev Barrett, because again, another legend, and a well-known name in martial arts at those times. So it's good to know that he's still going and still doing well.
Yeah, he's currently coaching the GB team at the WAKO European Championships in Turkey. Right. So it's the children's cadets, Europeans, and he's coaching the ring sports team out there. So he's head coach of ring sports for WAKO Kickboxing GB, they're now called. Still still our chief instructor in English Contact Karate Association. So very busy man. But I'll pop him a note.
Yeah, please do. I'd love to speak to him, because I think that regardless whether it's taekwondo, karate, kung fu, and kickboxing, whatever, the martial arts, I think it's nice to appreciate the different type of arts and the skills that they bring. One of the things that I still love is watching traditional karate competition.
Yeah,
I think it's great. I think the sort of tactical side of it, and the way it looks. I love traditional competition. I'm not a big fan of things like UFC and MMA. I like the respect and the bowing and all that sort of stuff, the philosophy behind the martial arts, which is shown when people are competing.
Yeah,
I really enjoy seeing that.
yeah, and interestingly, you get that occasion. So I love watching UFC. We don't stay up because we're too old for that now, but we record it, and then Sunday morning, social media like silent, so we don't see any results, and we sit and watch the night before's UFC quite often when we can. And I think it's really interesting. So you do see every so often you'll see traditional martial art, and you do see that absolute respect, proper niceness. They're not all thugs. There is a lot of that still going on in mixed martial art. They don't tend to get the same sort of press interest and social media stuff. But there was a fantastic fight just this weekend, and the mutual respect between the two headlining fighters was just incredible. They then went and smashed the hell out of each other, and then the mutual respect was back then after one of them had been knocked out, and it's just lovely to see.
Yeah, no, that's good. Well, maybe I should revisit it, because that's the thing that put me off. I just loved the fact that, you know, that traditional side, and one of the reasons why I liked watching things like Thai boxing, like you know, the respect that they have for regardless of you know, who wins or whatever. You know, they both appreciate each other, and there's that etiquette.
Yes.
Goes with it. And, okay, well, maybe I'll do it. My biggest thing is I haven't got a television as well, so that that doesn't help. Yeah, I'm into I tend to use my spare time playing guitar and stuff. But no, that's great. I mean, from you know, you mentioned you took over the school. I don't know whether you were like me. I was a very reluctant instructor in the early days, because I got asked to take a class by my instructor, and I hated it. And I thought to myself, if I ever get asked to do this again, I'm not coming back. So I remember standing there thinking, what am I going to do? What am I going to say? Because I had no training or teaching. So I just literally, I think I just did an hour of physical exercise. Because that was my thing. I was very physical, and I still love it to this day. And I think people must have crawled out of the room. But somehow I did say to myself I wasn't going to do it again. But when I got home, I just thought, I actually quite enjoyed that in a way. Whether it was the power thing, I don't know. What about yourself?
Very similar, except I never actually enjoyed it. Yeah, I was probably about 15. I remember being a brown belt. So I would have been about 15. And Sensei Dev just did a Geoff, do the warm them up. And I just, you know, again, like, there are moments in your life that you'll never forget, aren't they? The world fell below me. Well, that's what it certainly felt like. And you were just sort of like, sorry, what? And he was like, you know, so yeah, went to the class, absolutely petrified, and took the warm up and the stretch, and, you know, I'm imagining it was fine. Don't remember that bit, because you just panic, you know. And then, you know, sort of did that a few times. Then it sort of just grew to, you know, and then do a few basics. Never, because I'm a very methodical thinker, and used to like to plan everything. I don't plan classes now. I go with the flow a lot more. But early days, yeah, you know, if I couldn't plan it, I couldn't do it. And then suddenly I was walking up, happy kid with my kit bag, and then suddenly being asked to teach something, and it's like I hadn't planned, you know. When I chat with Sensei Dev now, or you know, over the more recent years, he was like, yeah, but that was my plan. I was getting your mind out of that. You know, you have to plan everything and getting your mind into. You do what you need to do at that point in time. And again, when you reflect back, that's just incredibly formative to your life and how you deal with stuff. Because all the time, at various points in your life, you suddenly have to try and deal with something that you're prepared for and hadn't thought about and probably didn't want to. And I say this to the kids in my club now. So if I've got anyone in the club, you know, wanting to be a black belt, they have to lead a class. They have to fight everybody in the club at one point in their club. You know, they've got to do all of these things that they absolutely hate doing. And the sort of the older kids are like, do we really have to do that, Sensei? And you're like, yes, you do. And again, what I can't say to them with any like thing that has me any credibility of a teenager is these are the things that you will remember. You know, throughout your life, you'll remember having to do this horrible thing that you survive, and then you know the next moment will be a little bit easier. So yes, I started very similar. In Sensei just making me do various things. Competing was the same. You know, Geoff, you're going to go and fight this weekend. Like, what? Sorry, am I? And just all of those things that you just, you know, if anybody had ever said to me, you know, do this when you feel like you're ready, I'd probably be sitting here now, a white belt, having not done very much, because I would never consider myself ready. But it's those points in time when, you know, somebody whose opinion you trust, and definitely trust Sensei Dev, is like, you know, you're ready to do this. It's time. You know, and that was my first Dan, that was my second Dan, that was my third. You know, it's like, it's time. You need to go and do this. You know, go and do this grading.
It's a really interesting thing, because you know what you say, what you said there resonates so much with me. I know what there's the attitude of the time, and a couple of things I want to mention here was very similar. You know, in the days of my early competitions, we used to have to fill out a form. But what used to happen is our instructor filled out a form. He said, "Right, just sign that," and go, "What is it? Oh, it's a competition. You're in." Oh, okay. That was it. You know, and that now. You know, my approach is obviously very, very different, because we're in a very, very different time. And you used to have to fill in the form, and you say, right, are you doing patterns or kata, sparring? We used to have destruction, wood breaking, and stuff like that. Stuff like that. And he just used to tick it all for us, and we did it all. And we had no choice. But I don't know whether you get this now. With my students, you know, they say, "Oh, yeah, I don't mind doing the patterns, but I don't really want to spar." Okay, and then somebody says, "Well, I'll do the sparring, but I'm not really into the patterns."
Yeah,
and there seems to be certainly in Taekwondo circles. I don't know whether this is the same in karate circles. There are specialists. There are pattern specialists.
Yeah,
there are fighting specialists. There are breaking, destruction specialists. Whereas we had to do it all, and we did it all. And actually, I did pretty well in all those disciplines, and you know I can, you know, have a fully rounded experience in my competitive days. Is that the same with karate at the moment?
Yeah. So for us competing, so although we are the English contact karate, so obviously contact karate, you'll know this, you know, back in the day was effectively kickboxing. So our competitions now are effectively kickboxing. So we are quite different to your traditional Shotokan events, but we still have, we call them free forms, so they're your patterns or your katas. So our ECKA competitions, we will have free forms for that like traditional element. We'll have points fighting, which we call semi-contact, and then we have like continuous. They're the structure of our competitions. And yeah, absolutely. You'll get a lot of people who, you know, nobody or very few people rock up wanting to do freeforms. What we'll quite often get is, I've got to do freeform in a grading that's coming up vaguely soon, so I'll practice it in the competition and sort of give it a go. So they can sort of see the merit of doing that. I'm yet to find your person who's like, I want to do freeform, you know. But so and then you get a lot of people. It's like, I want to do this type of, I want to do this discipline of fighting, but not that discipline of fighting, or I want to fight, but I don't really want to do the freeforms. And I've done exactly the same as your instructor. I've literally got their cards and like, no, you know, you're going to do these other things as well. You know, you're a black belt, you should be showing people what you can do, or you want to be a black belt, you need to show, you know. And start, you know, ticking the extra categories for people when you know that they can actually cope with it. I wouldn't do that to somebody and then, you know, have a little kid in tears. Like, I didn't want to do this. But yeah, and I think that does again form a bit of their character in the same way. But you're absolutely right. The world has changed. Have very few students that I think you're the next me that I can just say do this, and yes I will, which is what I used to be like with Sensei. And again, that with that world dropping behind me feeling, but still doing what your instructor said.
Yeah. And I think certainly in the day when I started, you mentioned that is that you had this sort of this trust in the teachers that were teaching you, that actually, they were black belts and they knew the way. So this is the way I have to be.
Oh God.
Definitely. And without a doubt, if they said, right, tonight we're going to practice levitation, you would go, oh great, and you would believe it. So I think that was the thing. You've obviously, again, you've been teaching some time, and obviously teaching methods, for want of a better word, has changed. And also the people that we teach has changed. My youngest student is 4. I have a preschool class, and then my eldest student is 84. So and obviously they're doing martial arts for very different reasons, and I have the people in the middle that want to fight and hit each other. How do you sort of cope with that? The cross section of people and ages.
So I again, very similar to how Sensei Dev taught us. So I only teach 2 types of classes still at the moment. So I actually I'll come back. So in my formal classes, so I have what we call a little dragons class. That's my 4, 5, 6-year-olds. I had one last night. They're quite loud, make your head hurt, lots of fun, lots of and at some point getting them punching and kicking, and a bit of fighting with each other. It's exhausting, but it is so rewarding. It's unbelievable. And then those kids progressing into the normal classes, and I've been doing that for quite a few years now. So I've got kids that have gone through that little dragons right the way through to black belts, and are now teaching others and all of those sort of things, which is just there's nothing like that, absolutely nothing like that. And then effectively most of my classes are mixed. So from about 8, the kids will join the mixed class. I haven't quite got an 80-year-old, but I've got a 62-year-old guy, and various other ages in between, and they all train together. So typically you've got incredibly gifted, super fast black belt in their teens, peak of their life, training with somebody who's either very new, considerably different age, considerably different ability, and they learn from that. And everyone is learning from that. So you're super incredible high grades. So I've got a girl from the club who's competing at the European Championships right now. Just annihilated a Turkish girl yesterday. I know I can put her with literally anybody in the club, although she can compete at that level, and she's got amazing control to just help them to develop. But by her working that way, she's building that control. She's not always smashing somebody, at 100% effort. So so that works incredibly well for me. I do have, the reason I paused, I have a couple of extra sessions where the ones that are fighting and competing, we just train. I don't really call them classes. We might do a little bit of pad work, but typically we're just sparring together again, like the old days. Just rounds of sparring, bit of pad work first, just to warm up, and just training. So I don't count that as me teaching massively. That's just the kids in the class, me when I'm feeling fit and healthy, joining in and still just having a go, really.
Yeah. No, that's cool. I mean, I think I sort of try and structure my classes to very similar to that. But I have my adult classes. I sort of give them a choice. I do have a separate fighting group that want to you know, and they do competitions, and those that want to do more of the technical side, they can do that as well. So it's sort of trying to give them options and choices, you know, because I think these days with, you know, as you mentioned, you know, kids starting at 4, and just giving them a grounding, not just in martial arts, but just in physical exercise, and trying to keep
and
them
discipline. I think that's why I get a lot of folk in that class.
Yeah.
And it's a hard balance. I've got somebody, her eldest lad is in that Little Dragons class, and she's a black belt of mine, and trained with me for, you know, probably close to 15 years now. And she just every week will say how soft I've got compared to the hard time I gave her when she was a teenager.
Yeah.
And I think on reflection, she's absolutely right. But it is that you've got to adapt your style.
Yeah.
And I think trying to strive that balance, because it's not a play group. You know, if they're fighting each other, hitting each other when it's not the appropriate time to, then they will, you know, they will get in trouble for that. But they are 4 or 5, and you still want them to have fun and enjoy their training. Otherwise, they're not going to come back. You know, if you're just spending, you know, an hour shouting at them, you're not going to see them again, and they're going to not have martial arts in their life. So it's a constant battle through that balance of getting that right, really.
Yeah, and you could easily sometimes when you're teaching that sort of age group, you could easily shout for an hour as well.
Yeah.
Particularly at holiday time, like when holiday time's on, they're all high. And
first week after the school's broken up. Yeah. Oh my goodness, they've suddenly got like so much more energy, and they haven't had that disciplined day. Yeah.
The sort of on the same topic. I mean, within Taekwondo, we have what we call the tenets of Taekwondo. There's 5 of them: courtesy, integrity, perseverance, self-control, and indomitable spirit. So, you know, I find when I was a young instructor, I didn't talk about those. You know, it was something, you know, they had it in part of the lesson, and they had to recite it in the grading. Oh, what's the 5 tenets of Taekwondo? You know, courtesy, integrity, you know. Now I tend to, as an older person, an instructor myself, I tend to focus on those quite a lot, in the sense that I say, right, okay, courtesy, yeah, okay, that's fine. What does it mean? How does that? How would I notice that in you? What would I see in you as an individual? And I don't know whether, you know, your teaching has changed in that way. As mine certainly has. Like I said, I'd get in the class, I'd dump out, you know, 50 preps. Come on, get on, run down, up and down the hall. You know, even with kids. But now I see the philosophical side of teaching the morals behind the martial arts is quite important. So
I think teaching what it means, both from a philosophical sense and what we are trying to do as martial artists. And you know, I had a student reasonably recently, and they got in trouble with parents, and it, you know, nothing major. He's a good lad. But I lent him one of my books about samurai and Bushido code, and I'd put a little bookmark in one of the chapters and was like, read this chapter. I said, you probably won't understand it, because all of those ancient books that have been translated, they're really hard to read, aren't they? But it was still like, you know, this is still fundamentally in our core what it means to be a martial artist. Read this, and then come back next week and tell me what that means. He did a decent job, and he's and I'm not saying I've turned him around, or, you know, but it seems to have helped him to understand. So we do get into that. Again, everything's a balance, isn't it? I certainly find myself explaining things so much more and questioning the student. Do you understand why we bow? And some people put their hand up and say respect, and you're like, excellent. You just sound like Ali G. I don't say that bit, but you know. And then you're sort of like, but what does that mean?
Yeah.
What does that mean? What does that word mean? What are we doing? You know, and trying to get them into, you know, the bow is not just a, you know, now we can have a fight, or this because I've come in, or this because I'm going out. It's the, you know, it's the being thankful and the being properly grateful for the ability to train, you know, and all of that. But again, you can see the kids' eyes glaze over when you know you're doing it a little bit too much, and you're like, right, let's get back to some punching and kicking then.
Yes.
You've had enough of this. But last night we did talking about Thai boxing and rituals. Last night I did a class that was fundamentally a Thai boxing class. I had a mixture of high grades and some low grades, but the lower grades had to do a bit of knees and elbows, and then I thought, we're just gonna. So we had the Thai music playing, and we were doing, the Thai rounds. But again, I started it with, right, who can tell me the difference between Thai boxing and kickboxing?
Yeah.
Tumbleweed. And then obviously I've got one guy who was training last night who's trained in Thailand, so I banned him from answering the questions. But yeah, and we got there. But it took a lot of but what is the difference? There's some really interesting answers. One of the kids was like, the guard is different, because he'd seen some Thai boxers. And I was like, well, yeah, but the guard is different for a reason. There's not like a rule that says your arms have to go like this because you're doing Thai boxing. So what's in the rules that's led the fighters to have a different guard? Tumbleweed. So yeah, it's trying to get them to understand just everything. It's not just about throwing a kick or throwing a punch. So yeah, tough one, but always trying to find different ways of nailing that, definitely.
I think my thing is that I say to them that martial arts is about it's really a self-development program, and I want them to be a valuable member of society first and foremost. Actually, a nice person that people say, oh wow, that's a lovely person, that's a lovely young man, that's a lovely young lady, and for me that comes first and foremost, so they can fit into society and actually be valuable. People say, wow, this place is better because you are in it. And if I can get that through, and it doesn't, I don't always get it through, and of course, with youngsters, they might go from martial arts, but football takes their fancy. But I always say to them that as long as they leave my class with a little bit of my philosophy, I'm happy. Even if it's only 3 months worth of me, but they'll remember that. So I think that's that's quite important.
I think the remembering bit is shocking and so uplifting. I've been truly honoured to go to weddings of my students years and years after they've stopped training. And some of them, you look around the room and you can see like massive load of family, few friends, because you can tell from the ages, can't you? And then there's me and Libby, my wife, sitting there like, wow, we are truly honoured to be sitting here. And they are like, oh my God, Sensei, so glad you made it. They're truly thankful that you've come to their big event. And as I say, for some of them, it's really years and years and years since they stopped training. And now I've got like the children of people who know the folks that trained, or used to train with me themselves. And they're like, oh, but it had such an impact on my life. Got to bring my family members, and it's just, that's why we do it, isn't it?
It is, and I love doing this podcast. It reminds me of different things, and it reminded me of one of the nicest things that happened to me last year. And in one of my schools, I teach in a couple of different areas. I teach in Swindon, in Bristol, and so on as well. And in one of the schools, I got quite a big Asian population from the Hindu community. And I remember one of the fathers came to me and said, oh, we'd like to invite you to a celebration. It's a celebration of teachers, because we like what you say to our children and how you do. I went along to this celebration and I was gobsmacked. They blessed me. They had flowers around my neck and said that, these are, and they had some school teachers as well, by the way. And they said, all of you have a huge influence in our children, and the way that you teach them is really important to us as families. And they had grandparents and parents. And they actually, afterwards, they said to me, would you like to say something? I said, I can only say that this is the nicest thing that's happened to me since I've been a teacher. I said, thank you so much. What can I say? This sort of spurs me on and motivates me to keep going. And it was really nice. And I get what I'm saying is, like, I know how you feel, because you're sitting there thinking, wow.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
this guy, somebody appreciates you so much, they invite you to a celebration that means so much to them. And that's really nice. That's really nice. So, I can definitely definitely concur with what you've said there.
Yeah.
And, it's excellent. But we're coming towards the end of the
no worries.
Coming towards the end of the podcast, and I mean, there are a number of things. First of all, I just want to say thank you very much for taking the time to share some of your insights. I'm sure my students who listen to this and other people's students are building quite a bit of an audience now who like these podcasts, which is nice. And I think what I try and get across is that actually, the martial arts for me is very special. There's a lot of people out there who, like yourself, special to them as well. And, your journey is really, really important. I think it's important for people to hear, where we've been, what we do, our inspiration, what motivates us, the things that we like to do, and so on. So I want to thank you for that. The other thing that I want to say is, is there's anything you want to leave, particularly the youngsters, because martial arts seems to be full of youngsters these days.
Yeah. My class.
With anything to inspire them along, really.
Yeah, well, I think I'm now 36 years in my martial arts journey, which makes me feel incredibly old when I do the math. But hey ho.
Oh, that makes me feel even old.
Sorry, apologies. But I'm still learning. So one of the things that I did, so a couple of years before lockdown, I had a phone call from Sensei Alfie, and he invited me to train with him. Again, another one of those world dropping from beneath you, because that was petrifying. Going to Liverpool in his Mushin Kai dojo, stepping in there and training with him and his students, absolutely incredible. And I'm still doing that now. Did that all through lockdown. So Sensei Alfie was incredible. One of those people that embraced Zoom.
Yes.
And I still do to this day. I still do my weekly Zoom class with Sensei Alfie, and that keeps my training going, as well as everything I do as part of ECKA. So I am fortunate to be training with two absolute legends in martial arts who teach in quite different ways, incredibly different ways, but a lot of similarities as well as those differences, and that absolutely keeps me thriving and alive. Main parting message, that wasn't the parting message, apologies, right? But the main parting message was, I'm just a normal, I was a normal kid. I got beaten up a lot. I don't mean that like out of school, but school was school. Yeah, you had fights at school, and they were a mixture. I've never been a natural talented martial artist. I've worked incredibly hard, and as I said, I'm incredibly persistent, and don't like giving up on things, which I think is partly martial arts has given me, and partly me that thrived in martial arts, where you can always learn another something. There is no perfection. There is, you're just striving for something a bit better than what you've done before. I always used to describe my early competitive days when I was a kid as I was the cannon fodder. Yeah. So the amazing fighters had to beat somebody in order to win the title or the Tom Championships or whatever. I was one of those people. Again, when you reflect back, and I was looking at the caliber of the people that was beating me up, like, I'm not surprised. You don't know that at the time. You just like, ow, that hurt. Okay, try again next time. But just kept going and just kept going. And again, like, I don't consider myself amazing at martial arts. I'm good. I'm decent. I'm the kids in my club think like, oh wow, but we'll never be able to do what you can do. And I'm like, you absolutely can. And I've had kids do stuff better than me. I've obviously got, now you got a lot of the students who are a lot more flexible, a lot faster. I'm now, getting towards 5-0. And so, teenagers are just physically different now, and I've got to accept that and figure out what's the next bit of teaching and how. So my parting bit is just stick at it. It will be horrible. It will test you in ways you don't want to be tested. It will make you petrified, but it is such a valuable tool for your life.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for that. I really appreciate that. And I hope at some point we can chat again. I hope at some point we can maybe meet up.
Yeah.
I am at some point as well planning to go up and see Sensei Alfie Lewis and a few people up north. I go up that way a fair bit, but it tends to be on Taekwondo.
Right. Yeah.
I'd like to go up on a friendly mission, just see some people, sit down, have a cup of tea with them, and just chat and say hello. So I hope at some point we can meet up. But I just want to say thanks very much for giving up the time. I can see you're passionate about what you do. I love people that are passionate about martial arts, and thank you very much for.
Thank you for the invite. Thank you for your patience, and really nice to talk. Yeah,
no worries. Well, stay around for a moment because I want to get some bits and pieces from you when I just press the stop here, so we can perhaps get some things in the show notes. So, thank you very much to the Living Martial Arts podcast fans. Really appreciate you listening. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. I just want to say a big thank you to Sensei Geoff Aldridge. Thank you very much.
Thank you.